for the scriptures. Thank you that they're just ways in which you can speak to us, that invites us into this place of life and experiencing your loving gaze. And so we pray for Bella and pray for each of us, for Bella to just clarity of what it is that she wants to say, and that you would speak into our hearts and our lives. Amen.
Okay, thank you, Rupert. Good morning, church family. Good to be with you and to just spend some time reflecting on a passage and an image that is very dear to my heart. We're in the middle of a series, or moving towards the end of a series of the 7 words, I am words, in the Gospel of John. So far, we've looked at 5 of these statements that Jesus made about his identity as the Son of God. I am. This was the name that God used to introduce himself when Moses said, "What should I say when the Israelites ask me who you are, who sent me?" I am, says God. And this means I am the eternal. I have no beginning and I have no end. When Jesus uses these words, I am, he does that very intentionally, and we've spoken about this in this series a few times. It means I am God. On the one hand, it speaks of his divine identity. It also speaks of his eternal, faithful presence, his mission to reveal God's heart to humanity and to fulfill God's plans to redeem humanity. When I saw the list of statements that Rupert you sent out, I thought, I hope the shepherd isn't taken yet, because it's my favorite image of Jesus in the Bible. And I have a story with the Good Shepherd, and that story started when I was 3, and I went to church for the first time with my mum. She'd just become a Christian, and she was very tentatively exploring Christianity. And I remember Sunday school. I'd never been to Sunday school before. I was really excited, and the lady who taught us brought a toy farm with her, with lots of sheep, and she told us the story of the lost sheep. And I was just captivated by the story. Loved the toy sheep as well. And my little heart was breaking for the sheep that got lost. And I was so excited when the shepherd found the sheep and took it home. And my mum had a really hard time getting me away playing with the sheep afterwards. I didn't want to leave. Let's not underestimate what a 3-year-old can understand about God. For me, that was the beginning of my walk with God. Hadn't understood everything, but I'd understood something of the love of Jesus that a 3-year-old can already understand. So my story with the Good Shepherd, from his perspective, started long before I was 3. But from my perspective, that was the beginning. I'm also excited to look at this statement with you today, because I've asked God to invite me to show me more than what I've already seen. Do you know what? I'm sure you know what that's like. Sometimes we're quite familiar and quite cozy with concepts, and at least I am. This idea of, this is a passage I know, and I'm quite comfortable with that. But sometimes it's helpful to invite God to show us more. And that is my prayer for today, that he'll show us more. Show me more, Jesus. That's my prayer as we look at this passage together. And let's do that now. Thank you, Rupert, for offering. Rupert's going to read from John 10, verses 1 to 21 from the NIV version for us, and then we'll have a look at the passage together.
Very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, "Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who've come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father." The Jews who heard these things were again divided. Many of them said, "He is demon-possessed and raving mad. Why listen to him?" But others said, "These are not the sayings of a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind?"
Thank you, Rupert. Yeah, Leslie, who spoke last week, very helpfully put this passage into context for us. And you will have heard a part of her sermon in our passage today, but they're so closely linked, I can't really take them apart. Yeah, Leslie talked about the context, and the context is a miracle. The miracle of a blind man who was healed by Jesus. He was able to see. And there was a lot of criticism there that he healed on the Sabbath. In verse 19 and 20, that criticism and that discussion continues. Some wonder if Jesus is demon-possessed, but others cannot but acknowledge that this is a divine miracle and that this must come from God. One thing is clear, Jesus' statement, "I am the good shepherd," is a huge statement. It's a bold statement. The shepherd is an ancient image an image of God that appears throughout the whole of the Old Testament, starting in Genesis. So I had a look. The first passage that I found in the book of Genesis was Jacob on his deathbed, blessing his sons, and talking about his relationship with the shepherd. And we know about Jacob. Jacob was a shepherd himself, wasn't he? So he knew about sheep. He kept livestock himself, growing his flock over the years. So when he uses this image of God as a shepherd, he speaks out of experience. At the end of his life, he doesn't see himself as the shepherd, but he sees himself as part of the flock, being led by the ultimate shepherd. And the sheep imagery and the shepherd imagery continues throughout the Old Testament. We find it in the Psalms a lot. I'm thinking of Psalm 23, you probably are too. It's a beautiful piece of poetry expressing David's trust in his shepherd. And again, David speaks from experience. He was a shepherd as a young boy, and then he was a king shepherding the flock of Israel. David trusts God with his life. He trusts God for provision. He trusts him in the dark valleys. He trusts God's overflowing goodness that will stay with him for the rest of his life. I learned Psalm 23 by heart when I was on a camp at the age of 13. And at that time, I had no idea how often I would come back to it over the years. I have recited it countless times. And I'm sure I'll continue to do that over myself and over other people. We find the shepherd image in Genesis and in the Psalms, but we also find it in the prophetic books. And I could do a whole sermon on this image of shepherd in the prophetic books, which I won't. But just in a nutshell, the shepherd we see in Isaiah, we see in Jeremiah, in Ezekiel, and in Micah. These passages are about God being Israel's shepherd, and they express his care for the flock. Here's one of my favorite passages about God as a shepherd. It's from Isaiah 40. He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those who have young. I remember this passage had a really important meaning for me when my kids were little and I was exhausted. And I like this idea that, yes, the shepherd looks after the little sheep, but he also has an eye on the mums and the dads. Those who have young are also guided by the shepherd. It's not only about the kids. We see God's tenderness with his flock in the picture of the shepherd carrying the lamb and gently caring for the older sheep. There are plenty of passages about God as the good shepherd, but there's also plenty of passages about other shepherds, that the rulers and religious leaders, they are portrayed as bad shepherds often, that harm the flock and that are only out for their own gain. And there are some passages, and that's where it gets really exciting, I think, some passages that give a glimpse of the shepherd that is to come, the messianic shepherd that God promises to his people. He will care for the flock like only God can. Reading these passages, I'm so excited. I feel that it feels like we're looking through a half-transparent curtain, and we already see the outlines of Jesus in those passages. In Ezekiel, God announces his shepherd David, who will be a prince among his people. So the Messiah is going to be a second David. And in Micah we hear, "But you, Bethlehem Ephratah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be the ruler over Israel, whose origins are from old, from ancient times. He'll stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth." That is the passage that must have made Herod tremble with fear. He was told, there's a new ruler, and that ruler will come from Bethlehem. So now, coming back from this excursion, I think we need it just as a backdrop to what Jesus is going to say now. When Jesus calls himself the Good Shepherd, he refers to all of these images that we've just heard about. He says, "I am the just ruler that you have been waiting for." He says, "I'm the shepherd that Jacob and David personally knew and trusted. The time has come. I'm here. I'm the one." And with everything we just said about the shepherd image in the Old Testament, I want to approach John 10, now looking at Jesus, and there are two characteristics that stand out to me that he embodies as a good shepherd. Firstly, the good shepherd is trustworthy. And secondly, the good shepherd is committed. As I was sitting with the text a few weeks ago, these two qualities of Jesus leapt off the page for me. I'm sure you know what that's like. You're reading a passage and all of a sudden something jumps out at you. And it's no secret that we look at the text through the lens of our lives. We interact with the text. And yes, we know the Holy Spirit is speaking, but it also interacts with who we are as people and what matters to us. In my role as a counselor, trust and commitment are key terms that I use over and over again, especially in my work with couples. I look for these qualities in relationships. If they are present, even if there are problems, the relationship has a good chance to thrive or to improve. And if these qualities are present in a marriage, that's really good news. But if one of those two is absent, the other one suffers as well. So for example, if one partner has an affair, this will affect the other partner's trust. Or if one partner doesn't trust, they will not be committed to the relationship. They won't want to invest wholeheartedly because they don't feel safe to do that. Happy, long-lasting relationships need both trust and commitment for everything else to be working. Those are the two supporting walls of the relationship house. We talked about that last year in connection with Barnabas. And I was reading John 10 over and over again. I marveled about how Jesus embodies both of these qualities. He's completely trustworthy and he's utterly committed. And I would like to invite you to look at these two characteristics of the Good Shepherd with me today. Let's look at the first one. Jesus, the trustworthy shepherd. Reading our passage, I was struck by what Jesus does not do here. He does not try to convince people that they can trust him. He's not out for the votes of people that might think, that guy looks trustworthy. I think I should follow him. Jesus introduces himself as the Good Shepherd, not the wishful thinking Good Shepherd, not the please trust me Good Shepherd, but as the one who already is the Good Shepherd. In verse 2-3, he says, the one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. Jesus introduces himself as the shepherd who has already gained the sheep's trust. When he walks ahead, they follow him out of the sheep pen, like the story that Leslie told last week, for those who were here, of the shepherd who was calling his sheep, and she was astonished. She didn't see any sheep first, but then the sheep came trotting from all directions. They came running from afar because that was a voice that they were familiar with, a voice they knew. The sheep know the shepherd's voice and only follow him because they know him. Speaking about trust, I remember one of the many times I had the privilege of holding the baby of a friend or a relative. And these babies are happy for a wee while with me, but then they'll want their mummy or daddy fairly quickly when they need something. I can talk to them, I can sing, I can pace back and forth with the little one, but so far I have not had much success with other people's babies. And I think the reason for that is because they don't know me well enough. When they're in a stress, they don't want a stranger. They want mummy or daddy. They want somebody who knows them, somebody that has proven to them that he cares. When my kids scraped their knees or had a nightmare, they wanted me. They wanted my husband to come and comfort them because they had seen our love and care before. Jesus talks about this picture here using sheep and the shepherd. He has gained the trust of his sheep. They know he's safe, and he will lead them to good pastures. They know the tone of his voice, and they will only follow him. A stranger who might try to lead them out of the pen will try as much as he wants. He has not earned the sheep's trust, and he won't succeed at leading them. Jesus says the opposite will happen. The sheep will actually run away from him. And right they are. Who knows what this shepherd, a wannabe shepherd, is up to? A stranger cannot be trusted, but a shepherd who continues to show care can be trusted. What speaks to me especially here is that the shepherd calls his sheep by name. He knows each of them personally. Yes, they're a flock, they're a group of sheep, that he leads collectively, but he also knows them personally. So for those of you who were a bit late today, I ask a joke question: why does the Good Shepherd know his flock so well? And the answer is because he has a relationship with all of them. Each trusts, each sheep knows him. He knows each sheep individually. I would try and imagine myself with a herd of sheep. I would probably really struggle to keep the different sheep apart if that was me. But hopefully, as I would start to spend more time with them, I would get to know them better. Well, Jesus knows his flock. He knows each and every single one of us deeply, personally. He doesn't just know our name, but our name stands for something, for our identity. I heard about a study in which scientists tried to find out people's favorite word. A lot of people answered it was their own name pronounced by a close person they loved, by a familiar voice. Another study used functional MRI scans and showed that when people heard their name being pronounced by somebody who loved them, it activated regions in the brain that were related to identity and to emotions. Names are important, even in Western culture, but I'm aware that often when I ask somebody who grew up in the West, do you know what your name means? People would often say no. This is very different in other cultures, where names are connected with purpose and with identity, often a blessing over the child's life. And Hebrew culture is a culture like that. Names have a deep meaning in that context. And God sometimes chooses names for people. So I'm thinking of Peter in the New Testament, who was called Simon, but Jesus gave him an additional name, or Jacob, who was later called Israel. I'm reminded of a passage in Isaiah where God speaks to his people in this way: do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. And this is the image I get from Jesus as the Good Shepherd in John 10. He knows his sheep. They are his, as a flock and as individuals. Jesus knows his sheep, and we could leave it at this. But Jesus goes a step further here to describe the depth of his relationship with the sheep. I'm the Good Shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And I was sitting with this passage. I had a very special moment with God, connecting with that. The words started to sink in: just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. I read it for a second time. I thought, could this be true? And I started crying when I realized, really, God and Jesus are so closely connected. They're part of the Godhead, the Trinity. They know each other so deeply. And that is how Jesus knows his sheep. And not just how Jesus knows his sheep, but also how they can know him. That's mind-blowing. Jesus knowing me so well is one thing, but me knowing him at that level, that is something else. If it didn't come straight from Jesus, I might think it's blasphemous to say something like that. But he says it. He wants such a deep relationship, and he talks about it as a reality, not as a future vision. It is possible for us finite, limited beings to be close to the infinite, unlimited God. That took a while to digest for me. What an invitation, I thought. That is for me and for us to know him better, if he thinks that this level of knowing is on offer in our relationship with God. I want that. Do you? Let's look at the second part now. Jesus, the committed shepherd. I've said this before. Trust and commitment go hand in hand. One cannot exist without the other. If one's gone, the other one collapses as well. So why can the sheep trust the shepherd? Well, I've said it before, because they have a relationship with him. Because he is there day and night, caring for them, guiding them, protecting them when it is necessary. His commitment, his investment is so different from the commitment of the hired hand. In verse 14, Jesus says, the hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he's a hired hand and he cares nothing for the sheep. Who is the hired hand, I was asking, that Jesus is talking about here? If he's the good shepherd, the true shepherd, the hired hands are those who are leading the people of Israel, probably the religious leaders. They lead the flock, but they're not fully invested. They're only in for their own gain, Jesus is saying. And they could change their mind at any moment. If there is danger for the sheep of Israel, the hired hand will choose his own safety anytime over the safety of the sheep and will abandon them. And the wolf will attack them. So the behavior of the hired hand, his running away, his abandoning of the flock, has indifference at its core. The sheep don't matter to him. He's indifferent, he couldn't care less. These must have been hard words for the Pharisees and anyone who understood this analogy. By learning about the hired hand and his lack of commitment, we also learn something about the good shepherd at the same time. Jesus creates a contrast here. This is not what I'm like, but this is what I'm like. While the hired hand does not own the sheep, the shepherd calls the sheep his own. While the first has invested nothing, the shepherd invests everything: time, finances, and his own safety. While the hired hand runs away and abandons the flock, the shepherd stays. He's in it for the long haul. While the hired hand allows the wolf to attack when the sheep are helpless, the shepherd defends the sheep with his own life. While the first is indifferent, the shepherd really cares. He cares deeply. How can anybody think that these two men are even slightly similar just because they both look after sheep? They couldn't be more different. And the difference comes to light not in the good moments, Jesus says here, when everything is easy, when it's plain sailing. The hired hand shows its true colors when things get tough, when things get risky, when there is a danger. That's when the true hero steps on the scene. The good shepherd has earned his title. He's fully invested, he's fully committed. Jesus is teaching a powerful lesson on leadership here, I think. When things are easy, we might not be able to tell the difference between a genuine leader and a leader who's only out for his own gain. But when times get tough, the genuine leader will be seen in his or her commitment and trustworthiness. And Jesus makes clear in John 10 here that his commitment goes all the way to the point where he lays down his life for the flock. The listeners will not have understood what that meant, but we know with hindsight what happened. We know about the cross and the brutal death that Jesus would endure. Jesus knew exactly what was coming. And he makes clear here in verse 18, and that really stood out to me, that his death would not be a series of unfortunate events. That it would not happen by accident. Nobody would be able to say, there goes another religious leader who failed. Jesus says here, no one takes it, and he means his life, from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. So I'm thinking in the rear view mirror of history, we can see what Jesus talks about here. He is God. He has the authority to sacrifice his life for the flock. Not for one moment did Jesus lose that authority. We know about his hard prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. He wished the cup could have passed him by. And it's incredibly hard to know what would happen and to look death in the face for him. But it was not an unfortunate death. It was not a meaningless death. And it was not an ending only. It was also a beginning. And the way I see it, it was the central moment in history. The moment that everything points to, both from the Old Testament and the New Testament. In the season of Lent, the church traditionally looks forward to this moment. First, Jesus' death, a sad time comes, but then the resurrection moment. The moment when grace triumphs over sin. The moment when mercy triumphs over judgment. The moment when light triumphs over darkness. And as we go through this season of Lent, we know Jesus will go through suffering. Yes, suffering is coming, but the resurrection day will come too. We're standing on resurrection ground because the committed shepherd has laid down his life for the sheep. And not just the sheep belonging to the people of Israel. Jesus also talks about us, the Gentiles, those who don't have Jewish origins. Those who will join the flock later. And I'm thinking of a passage I spoke on, I think it was 2 years ago, Peter entering the house of Cornelius, a Roman centurion. And that was unheard of, that a Jew would enter the house of a Gentile. The Gentiles were seen as unclean, but Peter got a clear command from God to do that. Because Jesus already had that in mind, to unite the flock, one flock with the other, and make it one flock. I have other sheep that are not of this pen, Jesus says. I must bring them also. They will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. Jesus is the good shepherd. He's fully trustworthy, and he's fully committed, and he deeply knows his sheep. Let's spend some time now in silence reflecting on what we have heard. Maybe you want to think about how Jesus has been trustworthy and committed in your life. Maybe you're at the point where you say, Jesus is not my shepherd yet. I'm not a part of the flock yet, but I would like to be. Then feel free to speak one of the team afterwards. We'd love to talk to you and pray with you if you would like that. Or maybe you're going through a very tough time in your life at the moment, where you feel confused. You've known the shepherd for a while, but there are some things that don't make sense. Maybe you cannot see the shepherd at the moment. You can't connect with his goodness. Then be honest with God about that as you engage with him.